Hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to apologise for the stark lighting. The power's out in this building which I'm using to record this video in, so it's a little bit stark, but hopefully it's not too bright. Today we're going to be talking about Piranesi, or Piranesi. I prefer to say Piranesi, I'm not sure why. First of all, this hardback edition is incredible. It's only available in hardback edition. I believe it's coming out in paperback this later on this year. The slipcover is also quite nice as well, especially the waves at the bottom. They're quite nice. You'll see the fawn character there as well on the cover and in the background to this video. This book came out in last year, 2020. I almost said this year, forgetting it's 2021. Susanna Clarke's third book, technically. She wrote a collection of I believe short stories before this, but after her most famous book, her debut novel, Jonathan Strange Mr Norrell, which is a sort of Regency book. It's a fantasy set in the Regency period. It's also 800 pages as well. I had heard about the book. I was vaguely familiar with the author, but I don't think I'm gonna read Jonathan Strange Mr Norrell. It's not really my sort of thing. It's also quite long as well. But I'm so glad I picked this up though, because I was in a reading slump, somewhat of a reading depression. I had started two books, and eventually got into Vericonium, my third book. I read the first short story of Vericonium and then decided it wasn't for me. So I was in a somewhat of a slump until I got this book, and I read it in maybe it was like two or 3 days, quite quickly, relatively quickly. So yes, this book came out in 2020, so it's one of the newest books I've ever read in terms of fiction works. I generally prefer older books, and this is sort of dispelled. I have this unfortunate idea that most new books are terrible. I'm not quite sure why that is. I think it's just because I spend so much time reading the good classics from older periods. But anyway, this book has just blown me away, really. I'll direct you first to the background of this image, and the background to the cover of this book. The book is about a man called Piranesi, as you might have guessed from the cover, the title. And we have there quite an interesting clue as to the nature of the character of Piranesi in the form of a fawn dancing upon a column or a capital. Piranesi is a man in two sort of worlds and two sort of minds. You're probably familiar with the fact that I don't generally give a lot of plot details, and I try to avoid spoilers, and I don't think I'm very good at skirting around plot points without giving spoilers. So for this book, which is a mystery book, I'll probably just give a few keywords and try to give you an idea of what it's about, but it's really a mystery book, and it grips you, and it's very engaging, and it's all this. Suffice it to say, it's a mystery book that deals with a man who is seemingly essentially he wanders around a never-ending house. It's very much, if you're familiar with the idea of, there's a thing called a Renaissance memory palace. If you're familiar with that might make sense. Various branching rooms, and there's statues as well. You might get the impression from the book that it deals with statues as well. There's many statues in this never-ending sprawling room house, and there's also a sea imprisoned within this house, this magical house. There are birds as well. There's sea life, coral and seaweed. It's a very peculiar sort of surreal book. I got this book from after I came out of this reading slump, I wanted to get out of this reading slump. I asked someone on an online forum for a book suggestion, and I gave the example of, I think it's one of Beksinski's art pieces, A7, A8, I think. One of the most famous works of his. It's the one with the double archway and the sea visible through the sea and the moon visible through two doors, and there's sort of red fungi. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, But anyway, it was definitely apt. It was an apt suggestion to get Piranesi based on that image, is what I'm trying to say. So yes, Piranesi is a character who dwells, and who's seemingly been in this house for a very, very long time, and that's all he knows. The book is an incredible. There's a sense of wonderment, not just because Piranesi himself is in wonder of the house, this strange house. It's also the fact that the way it's written is this might not make any sense to anyone that doesn't play games. I don't play games anymore, but I did attempt a game called The Longing. You might want to look that up. The Longing. It's an indie game where a little creature, a little melancholy sort of creature called the Shade, just dwells around, just walks around a seemingly never-ending cave as he waits for a sleeping king to wake up, and that's the first thing that came to mind. So yeah, the book. It seems like at first it seems like there isn't too much to it, but as we'll get into, it develops into this whole narrative structure, this wider sort of narrative that's surprisingly in depth and detailed for how it starts off. Also, without giving any spoilers, I'll say that the book deals with a lot of Plato's ideas, like Plato's allegory of the cave and Plato's ideal forms, the Platonic forms. So the idea, obviously, that there's this heavenly realm where there's celestial, untarnished, unmarred forms that are the sort of better aspects of mankind, or any object. So get the perfect sphere, where everything down on earth is more tarnished and marred, I suppose. And also the allegory of the cave, where these people are chained up, and all they know is the shadows on the wall, and the philosopher goes out into the real world and comes back and sees that things weren't just shadows, and then people in the cave have trouble believing him, because all they know is shadows. They don't think that there's a 3D world out there, or with colour, etc., etc. So it sort of dwells on those sort of aspects as well. It's a book about tainted scholarship as well. It's a book about really ancient magic, I suppose. Various scholars and students trying to figure out how this house might have come into existence, and there's darker aspects to the search for knowledge as well, and that's really that's the key thing in the book. So it's not just about this. As nice as the exploration through this colossal house is, it really is more than that. I suppose right now I'll talk about the fact that Susanna Clarke has done an impressive amount of work with how large the narrative feels. So for me, there's the local narrative of Piranesi and his relationship with someone called the Other, who is the only other person. It's not a spoiler to say, I believe it's on the back of the book. The Other is the only other person in the house. So there's that aspect where Piranesi is trying to figure out who the Other is, and he's trying to figure out more about the house with the Other. There's this whole branching narrative outside, which feels like it could fill an 800-page book like Susanna Clarke's other book, Jonathan Strange Mr Norrell. And we get all these different diary entries and journals and broken fragmented texts, and it feels it's a classic mystery book. And the mystery of it, just trying to figure out what this house is, really drew me in, I suppose. It's an incredible feat, really, with the amount of, and there's even bibliographies that Susanna gives, or the narrator gives, I should say. Bibliographies, different studies, made up sort of journals which will explain the magic elements, and it's just this feeling of everything drawing together, all these different external and internal sort of elements that really give you an idea of the world, and the house does feel like a world. over time, the sort of the information sort of it's like drip fed to you essentially. It's a really quite good pace actually. There were some times that I felt like it got a little bit repetitive, but and also since I was going to talk about, I usually talk about my positives and negatives in a separate section, but I'll say that most of the start of the book dwells on the wonder of the house, and it feels magical. But then, unfortunately, near the end, it has this sense of being a little bit too pedestrian and concrete, and we're mostly just dealing with the fragmented texts and piecing things together. And I feel like it went away from the wonder of the house and exploring the magic, and it sort of just focused too much on the instead of Piranesi exploring, almost nothing he did really mattered in the end, because he sort of sits down and then finds out most of the information that is necessary to understand how things came to be from the texts. He just pieces things together, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. Aside from that, though, it's an impressive feat, the amount of different threads that come together to weave this tapestry of a book, of a story. So on to the actual prose though. Let's go back to the prose. The thing for me, and I've done a bit of reading. I went on Reddit, asked loads of questions, got into discussions, read some analyses as well, various different sites. One of the things that everyone says is that the character of Piranesi is one of the nicest characters in fiction. He really is. He's quite inspirational. He's very naive, but he's very kind and empathetic. The way he writes, there's a lot of humour in the book as well. It's because he's sort of ignorant or sort of naive. And he's pure. The thing is that the house has made him kind in various ways, and his perception is not at all what the other's perception is. I'll just say that. So there's an interesting sort of juxtaposition between the other and Piranesi. And Piranesi, he almost feels childlike in a way, but he also he doesn't really deserve your pity though, because he's a scientist essentially. He uses his knowledge, and he has a lot of knowledge. He's also quite he's highly learned in terms of the different rooms that exist in the house. A lot of the humour comes from the fact that he can just spout out this massive diatribe about where you can see this and the 80th Western Hall and da 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 da. So yeah, there's quite a lot of humour to it as well, just in the way that the dialogue runs out, the dialogue plays out. So as I say, yeah, the aside from that, the sheer mystery of the story drew me in as well, and I guess just to reiterate the point, the amount of detail in this book is just incredible with the diary entries, and most of it. It's a book about texts, I suppose, and scholarship. And I've already talked about the cons, but I will say, just to reiterate, that it's the end does feel a little bit pedestrian in the sense that it's less of a magical ending and more of a concrete, sort of realistic ending, where we sort of know how things are going to play out essentially. And yes, it's less magical and more. It almost turns into a sort of crime sort of thriller in a sense, not to disparage it or anything like that, but also I'm a lover of fantasy, but I feel like I needed a little bit more description about what the nature of the house, I suppose. But again, to go into that would give too much spoilers, I think. On to the excerpts now. I don't believe I've given a great review for this book, because I'm trying to avoid spoilers. I wanted to talk more about the plot, but it really is. It's definitely one of those books that you have to discover for yourself. I'll try and give an idea what the book sounds like, just from this part of this description of the house given by Piranesi. The upper halls are, as I have said, the domain of the clouds. Their windows are grey, white and misty. Sometimes you will see a whole line of windows suddenly illuminated by a flash of lightning. The upper halls give fresh water, which is shed in the vestibules in the form of rain and flows in streams down walls and staircases. Between these two largely uninhabitable levels are the middle halls, which are the domain of birds and of men. The beautiful orderliness of the house is what gives us life. This morning, I looked out of a window in the 18th south-eastern hall. On the other side of the courtyard, I saw the other looking out of a window. The window was tall and dark. The other's noble head, with its high forehead and neatly trimmed beard, was framed in one corner. He was lost in thought, as he often is. I waved to him. He did not see me. I waved more extravagantly. I jumped up and down and with great energy, but the windows of the house are many, and he did not see me. A lot of those architectural elements and objects are capitalised, actually, and that's one of the unique parts of the book. Throughout the entire book, these elements are capitalised, and that has relations to the Platonic sort of forms. There are various theories of why that might be, but just to flag that up. So, for example, corner is capitalised, beautiful orderliness is capitalised, splendours is capitalised. And this book is written in epistolary format, I believe. It's written in diary form, in quite a unique way. For example, a list of all the people who have ever lived and what is known of them. Entry for the 10th day of the 5th month in the year the albatross came to the south-western halls. Since the world began, it is certain that there have existed 15 people. Possibly there have been more, but I am a scientist and must proceed according to the evidence. Of the 15 people whose existence is verifiable, only myself and the other are now living. I will now name the 15 people and give, where relevant, their positions. First person, myself. I believe that I am between 30 and 35 years of age. I am approximately 1.83 meters tall and of a slender build. Excerpt used to give Piranesi's mindset in contrast with the other, this mysterious other. What about a star? I said. If we perform the ritual at night, you can address the invocation to a star. A star is a source of power and energy. A moment's silence, then. That's true, he said, the other. He sounded surprised. A star, that's not actually a bad idea. He thought some more. A fixed star would be better than a wandering one, and it would need to be bright, appreciably brighter than the surrounding stars. What would be best would be to find somewhere in the labyrinth some point or place that's unique, and to perform the ritual there, facing the brightest star. For a moment he was full of excitement, then he sighed and all the energy seemed to drain out of him again. But that's not very likely, is it? Then he said again that every hall was exactly like every other hall, except that he called them rooms and used an epithet meant to denigrate them. I felt a surge of anger, and for a moment I thought I would not tell him what I knew, but then I thought that it was unkind to punish him for something he cannot help. It's not his fault that he does not see things the way I do. I'm realising as I go through this book, most of the excerpts that I could read are they contain spoilers. Mostly I can only read the descriptive elements where Piranesi is wandering about the house. A lot of the book deals with these journals and sort of diary entries and fragments of text, most or all of which have terminology and names that will be spoilers. However, it probably suffices just to give another beautiful passage where Piranesi is performing a task where he's going out at the behest of the other to record some stars for a ritual, the ritual that I previously mentioned. I made myself focus on the one thing familiar to me, the sound of the sea in the lower halls, the water lapping the walls in a thousand chambers. It is a sound that accompanies me all my days. I fall asleep to it every night, just as a child might fall asleep safe on its mother's breast, listening to her heartbeat. And indeed this is what must have happened now, because the next thing I knew was that I was waking suddenly out of sleep. A full moon stood in the centre of the single doorway, flooding the hall with light. The statues on the walls were all posed, as if they had just turned to face the doorway, their marble eyes fixed on the moon. They were different from the statues in other halls. They were not isolated individuals, but the representation of a crowd. Here were two with their arms about each other. Here one had his hand on the shoulder of the one in front, the better to pull himself forward to see the moon. Here a child held on to its father's hand. There was even a dog that, having no interest in the moon, stood on its hind legs, its front paws on its master's chest, pleading for attention. The rear wall was a mass of statues, not neatly arranged in tiers, but a jumbled, chaotic crowd. Foremost among them was a young man who stood bathed in the moonlight, elation in his face, a banner in his hand. I almost forgot to breathe. For a moment I had an inkling of what it might be like if instead of 2 people in the world, there were thousands. Alright, that's quite an ethereal passage there. He's sitting in a very high hall at night and looking through a single doorway to a full moon. And behind him there's seemingly alive statues all crowding around him to look at the moon. So this is quite an interesting one. It's not the greatest prose ever, it's not really that significant, but going back to the feeling of just exploring this house, also kind of sort of the humour in it as well. Just the sort of, it's like a comfortable feeling, I suppose. This excerpt here of this passage in the diary entry of Piranesi, where he's describing the things that the other has given him. He largely depends on the other in this large house. Again, it's that feeling of that game, The Longing, that I described, where there's a character just wandering through an seemingly endless space. And there's a lot of emphasis on dimensions and records and collecting in this book. And you'll notice that when you read the book, Piranesi focuses on he's almost prideful in the way, or respectful in the way that he looks at the house, and he collects things, and he takes care of potentially previous lurkers about in the house, and he loves all the statues, and he has favourite statues, etc., etc. A list of the things the other has given me. I have made a list of all the things that the other has given me, so that I will remember to be grateful and thank the house for sending me such an excellent friend. In the year I named the constellations, the other gave me a sleeping bag, a pillow, 2 blankets, 2 fishing nets made of synthetic polymer, 4 large sheets of heavy gauge plastic, a torch. I have never used this and cannot now remember where I put it. 6 boxes of matches, 2 bottles of multivitamins. In the year I counted and named the dead, he gave me a cheese and ham sandwich. In the year that the ceilings in the 20th and 21st northeastern halls collapsed, he gave me 6 plastic bowls. I used them to catch fresh water as it flowed through cracks in the ceilings and down the faces of the statues. One of the bowls is blue, 2 are red and 3 are cloud-coloured. The cloud-coloured ones are troublesome. They are almost exactly the same whitey grey colour as the statues. Whenever I put them somewhere to catch water, they immediately fade into the surroundings, and I lose sight of them. One disappeared last year and I have yet to find it. 4 pairs of socks. For 2 winters my feet have been warm and cosy, but now the socks are all in holes. Unfortunately, it has not occurred to the other to give me new ones. A fishing rod and a line, an orange, a slice of Christmas cake, 8 bottles of multivitamins, 4 boxes of matches. And it goes on for a little bit. Again, just it's quite. I suppose it's easy reading in a sense. Of course, there are high themes and high meanings and complex meanings, but it's quite a fun read, especially with all the little fragments of text that are put in, the messages that are written to various characters, and it's definitely has a lot going for it. It's not just your standard narrative. I'm not used to reading just bullet points in a modern book, I suppose, or in any book. I'm going to read this very quick entry to finish off the review, just to give. I can't leave it without giving an impression of the larger story, and there's so much here that I've not actually described. I've mainly focused on Piranesi and his sort of wanderings. I'll just read this without any context. In 1976, Manchester Museum had in its collection 4 preserved bog bodies dated between 10 BCE and 200 CE. and named after the peat bog in which they had been found, Marepool in Cheshire. It goes on to give a list of the Marepool bodies. Arne Sayles was most interested in Marepool 3, the head. Arne Sayles said that he had performed a divination that had identified the head as belonging to a king and a seer. The knowledge the seer had possessed was exactly what Arne Sayles needed to further his own researches. Combined with his own theories, it would result in a watershed moment for human understanding. A little bit further on. No one was charged with the break-in at the museum, but in his next book, The Half-Seen Door, Allen and Unwin, 1979, Arne Sayles talked about a Romano-British seer called Adidomarus, who had been able to walk a path between worlds. So you can see there's a lot more to this book than I've largely talked about. And I think I'll end it there just by saying that if you're wondering what the name means of this book, the name is an allusion to Giovanni Battista Piranesi, a famous illustrator of Roman ruins and, in this case, fantastical prisons. So there's a lot of hints here as to what the book is about, and hopefully that's somewhat tantalising and it draws you in. Obviously, I definitely recommend reading this book. It's now one of my favourite books of all time. I'll probably read it again, and not knowing the secrets that the book holds, I'll probably enjoy it even more. So that was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. If anything, just get it for the wonderful edition. So thanks for watching, everyone. Till next time.